Welcome everyone to today's Edison Electric Institute webinar, Communicating and Leading Change, Lessons from Nature. My name is Vanessa Ferrero and I am a manager for international programs at EEI. Today's session is part of EEI's Destination 2050 Dialogues, our COP26 webinar series focused on the critical issues for the clean energy transition. We are excited to welcome two speakers today, Michaela Emch, communication specialist and author of From Nature's Mouth, the Handbook for Bioinfused Human Communication, and Silvia Mirandola, co-founder of Biomimicry for Business and author of Leadership Safari, Meet the Experts in the African Savanna. They will be joined in conversation by Lawrence Jones, Vice President for International Programs at EEI. This session is a dialogue, so we encourage you to ask questions for our speakers using the chat feature. Lawrence will aim to incorporate as many of them as possible into the conversation. Without further ado, I will turn this over to Lawrence to get started.
Thank you, and good morning, good evening, good afternoon, wherever you are. Welcome to this session on communication and leadership. What can we learn from nature? Vanessa, thanks for the kind introduction, and I'm very delighted this morning to have here with me our two distinguished speakers and panelists, Michaela Emch and Silvia Mirandola. As we all know, as the world prepares to head to Glasgow, communication, collaboration, and partnerships will be crucial, not just to what happens in Glasgow, but also crucial for the energy transition. Global governments, individual businesses, citizens, and different groups have to learn how to communicate. And to address the global climate change, a challenge that we all face. The threat is real, but there is also solutions. There are solutions that we can learn from nature as we embark on this conversation. We're going to focus today on communication and collaboration. During the sessions, one of the things we'll be talking about is how do we understand things like nature-connected leaders that will be building communities with nature-inspired citizens. And then at the end of the day, we'll have nature-based solutions. So to kick things off, Michaela and Silvia, we're going to have a very informal conversation. So we're not going to be too strict, be free-flowing so the audience can get involved. But let's begin by first, Michaela, tell us a little bit about yourself. How did you get involved in biomimicry?
Hi, Lawrence. Thanks for having us. This is very exciting to reach across different disciplines. I am personally involved in biomimicry since only about a year, when I was trying to find something to do during COVID from my home and something new to learn. So I reached out to the organism that taught me how to become a safari guide. And there it was, a course, an introduction on biomimicry. I registered and I got hooked very quickly and did the whole biomimicry practitioner courses. And in doing so, I wrote my book about communication inspired from nature, because not much had been done on biomimicry in human communication. And so I filled that gap. I hope to trigger the conversation in this regard. And I'm very happy that you're interested.
Well, you know, what you just said is stimulating in the sense that it's fascinating, in the sense that you went from knowing nothing to writing a book. And that demonstrates the impact that biomimicry can have for someone to spend a year of their life learning a new field. Let's go on to Silvia. Silvia, maybe you have a different inroad into biomimicry. Tell us about how you got involved in the biomimicry.
Yeah, first of all, thank you very much, Lawrence, for this invitation. So I'm a biologist by education, a PhD in virology. So, you know, biology is something that belongs to my DNA, let me say. So I got involved in biomimicry in 2019 because I attended by accident, let me say by accident, a course with the Biomimicry 3.8 school in US. And this course was on biomimicry and social innovation. And that course was really inspiring. I felt that it was the missing piece of the puzzle that could collect together, put together all my competencies, all my skills, all my knowledge. And so I started, to tap the biomimicry, and really, it was really something that opened me new worlds. And I started to create products with the lens of biomimicry.
Mm. Yeah, so what's interesting is we are the Edison Electric Institute. Electricity is what we focus on, trying to bring electricity to billions of people around the world. And one of the things I hear often about our industry is that we do a good job in providing electricity, but we do a poor job in communicating what it is that we're doing. And at a very important juncture in the industry where we're going to go through this major energy transition, I was very intrigued by understanding what are we missing from a communication standpoint, and what can we learn as leaders from nature. And so for me, having the two of you here with your very distinct backgrounds coming to this field it gives me hope that we can also, from an electricity standpoint, from an energy sector standpoint, learn something from you all. So before we jump into the Q&A, Silvia, I know you and Michaela have a short presentation to at least let myself and the rest of the audience listening understand some of the fundamentals of biomimicry before we jump into the Q&A. So go ahead and play the video or play the presentation.
Yeah, thank you. Okay. So before starting telling you about the biomimicry in nature, is extremely important to understand the context. So first of all, I would like to introduce the context where we live nowadays. So the world we have generated in this last decade is very much different from the world from how the nature works. So we are definitely in a VUCA world that is volatile, uncertain, changing, and ambiguous. So, and everything can change in an instant. So while we are sitting here, our world is burning with the consequence of deforestation and loss of biodiversity. While we are sitting here, our ocean are choking in tons of plastics, and the discharge of oil at sea are killing thousands of fish and birds. We are also in a world where there is a rise in carbon emissions, so with the consequence of climate changes and acid rains. And moreover, as we can see here, we are assisting also to a deterioration, let me say, or a risk for the human health. And the zoonoses are increasing. So the COVID was one of the examples of zoonoses, because everything is interconnected. And moreover, what happened if we look at the companies? Also, the companies, the numbers we can see are really intriguing, because from this report that were published very recently in these last years, 82% of managers aren't good at leading people. 75% of cross-functional teams are dysfunctional, And in 86% of the cases, there is an ineffective communication. And this is a very last data that reports that 52%, 52% of workers are feeling burned out, plus 9% before the COVID. So really the situation is critical. Let me say it's critical, not only at ecological and social level, but also inside the company. There is something that is not working. And what Professor Sharma from MIT of Boston say is the fact is that we collectively create results nobody wants in almost any kind of system today. So guys, how can we make sense of that? We don't want these results. So our context is based on a very old model that is based on growth, control, take and consume, fast food, everything is fast, winner takes all, disconnection, silos, system in silos, reductionism, and isolation. This is the old model. I think that we desperately need new model. We really need a shift from ecosystem to ecosystem. And I want to ask you, when we have a problem, we ask, how would nature solve this? So I would like to show you this polling question, and I ask you to get into the link. Michaela now will share the link in the chat box. So if the audience can click on the link and answer at this question, please. So what's your opinion about the relationship between humans and nature? Please vote. Wow. Let's keep people voting. Okay. Well, we see that the score is, the higher score is for humans are part of nature and should follow her rules. And there is another part of people that say that that humans and nature are linked, but humans master nature. And the lower score is that humans and nature are two distinct entities. So Michaela, would you like to comment, and also Lawrence, to say something about this?
I think it is quite interesting to see. I think that 5 years ago, we would have a different score than today. I think the past 2 years of the pandemic and also the raising awareness of climate change and different ecological catastrophes has moved people to realize that they are more part of nature than they used to think. And I'm very glad about that, because nothing can happen unless we acknowledge that we're part of a system, and this system is nature. and that we are part of the system. And since we are part of the system, we can change the system, which is one of the key elements to be able to foster change in the future. Lawrence, do you have a take on that?
Yeah, I do have an interesting observation when I look at this in the group that says humans and nature are two distinct entities. We don't have the time, but it would have been interesting to understand why they think that, because it's an interesting fact that there are those who believe it, or at least think that, or have that opinion. And then the second one is also a bit intriguing, that humans and nature are linked, but humans master nature. I think that opinion is one that concerns me, because I think part of the trouble we're facing today is the fact that humans may think we master nature, but in fact, nature masters us or controls us. I mean, we see what's happening when you look at the wildfires, you look at the hurricanes, all of these things, it's nature at work. So I think these are very intriguing results, in the sense of majority, at least, which is the hopeful part, believe that humans and nature they're part of nature, and humans should follow the rules of nature. So that's an encouraging side. But yeah, it's good feedback.
Okay, so let me show you another question. So how much do you know about biomimicry? I would like the audience answer at this question. So again, Michaela will share this link, but you can use also the QR codes if you like to connect directly to the answer. So please vote. So very few voters at the moment, so we wait a little bit more. It's really interesting to see this answer. "15 voters. Okay, let's start to make comment on this. So, okay, there is some people know about biomimicry and they practice it, and there are people that they never heard, that have no idea of what biomimicry is. So I think that would be really interesting what we are going to tell you later. And there are people that they have heard about it, but they don't know what it is. And so there is kind of, yeah, most of the people probably know and practice, and there is 30% more or less that they don't have any idea, or they have heard, but they don't know what is exactly. So Michaela and Lawrence, did you expect these scores, these results?
I think it's very revealing about the audience we have today. We have some biomimicry aficionados with us. Of course, since the title of this talk is about learning from nature, but we also see that we are including new people and spreading the meme to people who have never heard about it. And I'm very happy to see that there is interest, even from people that have no idea about it and still registered for this webinar and are curious about it. And I encourage people to spread biomimicry wherever they can once they have learned about it today.
Yeah, I agree. I think the only observation that's someone just sent me a text making an interesting observation that obviously the respondents are responding to strongly agree, strongly disagree. And so when we look at the average, maybe we can sort of, in general, you could say for this question, yes, that there are maybe 50% of those who are practicing it and agrees with that, they're practicing it and know about it, and others don't. So I think this is an interesting balance. And if you extrapolate, with maybe 50% of the people listening to this call may have not heard about it, and 50% have heard and are practicing. So it should be interesting once we get into the conversation about what it means for communications and leadership.
Okay, Michaela, you can introduce the biomimicry to us, please.
Yeah, so now that we know that lots of people here don't know what biomimicry is, biomimicry is basically, in a very compact way of thinking, it is the purpose of learning from nature and mimic its strategies instead of learning about it. Biology is learning about nature, biomimicry is learning from it. Biomimicry is an ancient practice that has been used over millennia. We can think of Leonardo da Vinci, we can think of Native American ways of planting crops, all the hunter-gatherers used it, and early agriculture as well. Basically, we practiced biomimicry until the Industrial Revolution, since everything was working on natural processes. And it's a discipline that has been formalized, and formalized in a sense of going across disciplines and creating a meme in the 1990s by Janine Benyus in her seminal book, Biomimicry. And since then, it has evolved into a community of practice all around the world, mostly in the beginning on the technical aspects, and now also in social innovation processes and systems, in order to apply nature's wisdom, which has 3.8 billion years of R&D. So if we can learn from the masters, which are the species that have survived 5 mass extinctions, I think we're at the best place to learn the best lessons and use them for our common good, for ours as humans, but also as inhabitants of this planet. So that's the basic definition. The way you practice biomimicry, from my point of view, is you find a challenge, you abstract the challenge you're looking for, you look in nature how nature solves this challenge, you re-abstract it and apply it for human use, and also for the good of all the inhabitants of the earth. So it's a quasi-scientific process. It's not all about hugging trees, even though hugging trees is perfectly fine, but it's also more of a scientific approach of what we can learn from nature, and not only experience it, learn from it in a thorough way. Biomimicry allows people to reconnect to nature, to innovate, to change their lens, to change their outlook on life, which certainly was the case for Silvia and for myself. Once we touched biomimicry, you don't look at the world the same way. And very often from people I heard about around me, once you touched it, you cannot let it go because it makes so much sense. It was here under our noses all the time, and we never thought about it in that way. And that's where biomimicry is very transformative. It goes beyond sustainability into the regenerative mindset in order to save us and save the planet. Do you have a comment about this?
Can I make an observation, Michaela and Silvia?
Yeah.
So as the newbie to this field, I just thought of something that the audience may find interesting when Michaela said, when she mentioned scientific aspect of it. Think of Isaac Newton. I think observation of nature and learning from nature has been around. And if we think about it strongly, we'll realize that the entire scientific evolution, as a scientist engineer myself, a lot that happened was about observation. If you go back to Benjamin Franklin and electricity, if you go back to Isaac Newton and observing the apple falling. So I think observation is a fundamental part of science, which has been the root of all scientific discovery. So in essence, biomimicry has been with us throughout generation. If you look at all the major laws of physics, those laws were not identified in laboratories. Oftentimes, they were discovered by someone sitting outside and making an observation of nature. And so it's interesting that it's been around much longer than most people think. I'm just getting this from my engineering friends and others who've been thinking, oh, this does sound so biological. No, it's actually how engineering and science have evolved by observing nature.
Especially engineering for centuries. Also cooking, just the idea of cooking food and using fire is a biomimetic application.
Yes.
Yeah, let me say, as a scientist, I've observed a lot. I spent time and time at the microscope observing microorganisms, but I think that the real change, the shift or the switch of biomimicry is that you observe, first of all, observe, and then emulate the strategies. So this is the real switch, not only observing, trying to understand how nature, how systems work, but emulating the strategies of nature. This is the real switch. So Jan and Benus say that learning about the natural world is one thing. And this is what usually science makes. But learning from the natural world, that's the switch. That's the profound switch, she said. Did you hear me, Lawrence? Because I didn't see you.
Yeah, no, I had a little glitch with my machine, so it's up and running now. So you can go ahead. Yeah,
I say that obviously science is based on the observation of strategies, of processes, and so on. But the switch, the real switch of biomimicry is not only observing, but it's observing is the first step, okay? And the second step is emulating. So keeping that strategies from the nature wisdom and emulate them, trying to solve our problems with those strategies that are working, that have been working for 3.8 billion of years. So they have been tested in trials of ages, and they work. So this is the real switch. Nature is the greatest research and development lab that we have. And this from this lab, only sustainable products are delivered in the market, let me say, using a business words. So really, we should look, observe, understand about, but then learning from it, emulating.
Okay.
It is important to do this emulation in consciousness. I think most people emulated nature maybe by chance sometimes, But with biomimicry, you really look for the strategy that is applied and you try to mimic it, hence biomimicry. We mimic the systems, processes, and forms from nature. So it's really a conscious application. And that's also maybe in the framework about learning from nature and applying it rather than just observing. Yes.
Yes, Michaela, we have a kind of question, let me say a question from the chat. They say it would be nice to know how people are practicing biomimicry. So can you share with us some examples of biomimicry practice?
Well, for a very long time in our modern world, biomimicry, understood as it is now, was mostly applied for technical reasons, like adapting form to function. Great Swiss inventor invented Velcro by going into the forest with his dog and seeing that burrs were attached to his dog's fur, and then looked at it from up close because his challenge was to find a way of getting a system that would put two surfaces together in extreme conditions like wetness or zero gravity, for example. And by looking under the microscope at the structure of these burrs and at the structure of the fur of his dog, he could see there was a hook and an anchor system. It's like the velvet of the hair of the dog was getting gripped at by little hooks that were on the burrs. And so this is why Velcro got invented. It was basically an emulation of nature. Those are the most famous applications of biomimicry we hear around us. Silvia, you know about the Shenzhen train. The front of the train used to make a sonic bang when it entered the tunnel. And the engineer that was in charge of solving this problem was a great birder. And he was thinking what kind of beak of a bird would go from one environment into the other, from air into water, without disturbing at the penetration of one substance to the other. And he saw the kingfisher's beak and emulated with consciousness the shape of the beak of the kingfisher to the train, and solved the problem not only of the bang, but also, I think, correct me if I'm wrong, reduced drag by 15% and reduced the need for energy for the train in the same process. So these are the very famous applications that anyone has heard of. Most people who know biomimicry start with these emulations, but it's also possible to apply it in systems, such as creating ecosystems. That's where we get into the whole circular economy. One person's waste is the other person's bounty, and can be a raw material for another. Just kind of like a mutualistic symbiosis. Or you can look at processes, which is more my field, processes of communication that you can see in cells, that you can see in animal communities, and look how they arrange in order to learn something from it and apply it in the human field. So there's many applications. Also, of course, your favorite, Silvia, leadership and governance and team building are also on the processes and systems and not on the form.
Yeah, I think, I see we're getting some questions already coming in, some very good questions. So maybe let's park the questions, Silvia, and once you get through the presentation, because I think there are more insights in the presentation since I've already looked at it. So I have a little insight in what's there. And then let's get through the presentation. I know there's a wonderful video, and then we can get into the conversation, because I keep sending your questions. I see some of them very intriguing. So let's get through the presentation and the video, and then we can get into this.
Okay, so we can move on another question that we would like to ask the audience. One second. Okay. Oops. Sorry. Okay. So how, oh my God. Okay. How do you think biomimicry could be used in your company? And if you, Michaela, you can share, please, the link. So it could be used in products, services, leadership, team working, all of them, or none of them. I don't see the results. I don't know why. Let me try again. Okay. So, yeah, there are 11 voters. Let's wait a little bit more that people can vote. Okay, the majority of voters says that they would like to use biomimicry for all of them. So all the products, services, leadership, some of them think that it could be used mostly in services and leadership. So would you like to add something more, Michaela and Lawrence?
No, I think it's fine. I think it matches what Michaela said, that it's all over the place. So the fact that most people think it can be used in all of those different areas, I think speaks to the fact that it's a universal tool to address a lot of the challenges we're facing.
All right, I had a technical glitch. I'm back. Sorry about that. Yeah, I'm very excited to see that people are looking at integrating it in different ways and not only in one precise aspect. I think products is the most known way of applying it, but leadership and I personally underwent mutation in my own business and changed all my practices to biomimetic practices, which took me about 6 months. It's very interesting to look at all your business processes can be inspired by nature, depending on the function that you're looking at. Business acquisition can be biomimetic, customer retention can be biomimetic, communication, social media can be biomimetic. And I'm very excited to be able to bring that to my clients now and also to the world.
Excellent, fascinating.
Okay, so I think that the 21st century, we can call it the age of biology. And this was the thought of great innovators, innovative thinkers like Steve Jobs. He stated some time ago that I think the biggest innovation of the 21st century will be at the intersection of biology and technology. A new era is beginning. It really had the right vision, I think, because absolutely we are entering an age of biology. Biology could be the new model for the mankind that can teach us a new way of living, a sustainable world. And let me say that also, some years ago, it was 2017, in Fortune magazine, there was a paper, there was an article that says that biomimicry is going on the mainstream. And they say that is one of the 5 trends to ride in the next future. So really, biomimicry starts to be a buzzword, not only for designer, architects, and engineers, but also for businessmen, for leaders. I think that biology, and let me say the nature wisdom, has to teach us a lot, also regarding leadership. So the question is, how can nature inspire new styles of leadership and or communication? So Michaela, tell us something about nature and communication. What can we learn from nature in terms of communication?
Thanks, Silvia. When I started writing my book, the process I underwent was to look at the world we do not want, just like we showed the first slides of the challenges that are facing human communication for the 21st century. I came up with 8 challenges. I will not list all of them here, but one was the lack of communication within communities. The question of confidence and truth between partners, business partners, family partners, different species, the building of trust, censorship, access to information, fake news, of course. They all got into 8 clusters for me that I describe in my book. And for each of these 8 challenges, I tried to find solutions in nature. How does nature handle the building of trust between partners, symbiotic or mutualistic relationships? How can nature apply filters to incoming information in order not to disrupt the species that is getting the information? And so I abstracted the challenges and I came up with 13 rules that humans can apply in order to better their communication or get better outcomes for everyone based on communication. And something I had not planned in the beginning is that these 13 ways of communicating, or 13 rules, or 13, I call them 13 sparks to reignite a more connected communication, they end up, which will please you, Silvia, to be the way humans should communicate, like cells, human cells. Cells have ways of communicating that protect themselves, installing filters, collaborating, competing when they have to, killing out bad actors, while fostering good communication. And it was quite amazing that without a plan, I ended up with this idea that humans, if they want to communicate for the better of all of humanity, will act like cells inside a body, because basically we are cells inside the body of humanity. We are all nested inside one another into this greater organism, which is our species, and also into nature. So let's act like tissues rather than like cancerous cells, and collaborate in order for the organism or humanity in that sense to thrive. So communication can be derived from processes that you see in the human body, but also between species and within different species. It all depends on the precise question you ask. There's no one size fits all. If one company or one family, I guess you can do it in family therapy as well, thinks there's a dysfunctional communication aspect, you can turn to nature, find examples, and then apply the abstracted solutions to your way of communicating.
Interesting.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you very much, Michaela. So
and for the slide you're showing here, sorry, I'm cutting you off. The previous slide, sorry. Yeah, I'm working on an international project right now that it's quite ambitious. And we are trying to apply, we're willing to apply biomimicry at 3 levels. We were talking of the form level, you know, where you emulate the shape. And then you have the process level. And then you have the systemic level. And this international and multicultural and interdisciplinary project will have a communication component through 3 levels as well. First, we'll create a narrative around a species that will be the emblem of the project in order to clarify our intentions and make it understandable through metaphors to all stakeholders within and outside the project. Then we will move on to applying biomimicry to the construction. It's a construction project of a town or a sub-town. So get the processes and construction and community integration aspects into the application of biomimicry in a more stricter sense. And in the end, we should create an ecosystem with common values in and around the project, which is then on the value level. So you can really go in concentric circles from the center of the project towards the outside, and also connect all these aspects to the communities that will live in and around the project.
Yeah, this is great. I just want to tell the audience we're going to start the Q&A very shortly, so give us another 5 minutes or so to get through this. There's an interesting video you need to watch, and then we'll start the Q&A because we're going to dig into some of these things from a communications around climate change perspective. So go ahead, Silvia.
Yeah, so I'm going to show you a video now that can summarize what we have told until now, and also introducing you in a new dimension. So how can nature be of inspiration for a new style of leadership? What kind of leadership lesson can we learn from the savanna animals and the plants, and from the savanna as an ecosystem? So let me show you this video, please.
Excellent, excellent.
Thank you, Lawrence. So yes, I think that nature can be really an incredible teacher for leadership. As I told you before, also inside the company, there are numbers that I show you before that are showing that we need a change. We need to change the reality or the way we lead people inside the company, the way we create teams inside the companies. So it's really interesting because there are converging ideas in both the natural and also the social sciences that suggest that we have a common root, leadership as a common root across humans and other species. So by looking at leadership lessons from natural mentors can be an example for us of new way of leadership, a new style of leadership, and probably that make us understand and also how can I say, improve the human leadership today, especially during harsh times, because plants and animals in the savanna are under forces that are under different forces, and most of the time they are really in harsh conditions. Okay, so probably those strategies can be very useful in the VUCA world, as I told you before.
Okay. I know in the interest of time, we have a few more slides, but if you don't mind, Silvia, I will jump to the Q&A and then maybe we can come back to, because I'm going to ask you questions about both of these mentors, the whistling torrent as well as the cheetah and the elephant. So let's maybe let's stop sharing for a second and let's get into the conversation, because I want to get some of these questions addressed right now. And we're going to start with a question from Fred Morse. I think he hits the whole point about leadership. So Fred's question is, how can we get leaders who want power and wealth and use technology to gain that let go and learn from the act of harmony in nature? In essence, I think what Fred is saying, as we start to think about climate change and all these big challenges, what can leaders learn from nature in terms of how they should govern, how they should conduct themselves? Maybe Michaela and then Silvia.
Yes, Lawrence, while we prepared this discussion, remember I was telling you about the monkey that's hoarding all the bananas?
Yep.
So if you were in nature and you saw a monkey hoarding all the bananas, you'd say, what's wrong with this monkey? He's not sharing in his community. He's not playing the game of nature. He's not going for balance. Mm-hmm. And we humans love people who hoard bananas, and we put them on covers of magazines. So something is wrong with the way we look at hoarding wealth or energy or whatever, because in nature, basically, the whole idea is to get into balance and to foster the ecosystem. So sharing resources seems to be the natural way, and hoarding resources the way we have done or we praise is not a sustainable way of doing society, I guess. Mm-hmm. But Silvia, you're the expert about the leadership.
Yeah, there are so many examples in nature about leadership. So let me say that, first of all, nature rewards cooperation. So mutualistic relationships are extremely important in nature. Nature is based, let me say, most of the time is based on mutualistic relationship, where there is a net benefits for the partners in this mutualistic, for each of the partners of this mutualistic relationship. For example, I think about the whistling thorn acacia, one of the mentors of the savanna that are described in my book. And really what is absolutely incredible in these plants, that its growth is based, and its survival is based of a mutualistic relationship, and and not only with one partner, but what is incredible is that its survival strategy is based on sequential partnership. It means that this plant has different partners that are ants, okay, different species of ants at different stages of its life. And each partner meets the needs of the plant at that particular time. So, for example, during the young age, when the plant needs, it's really vulnerable, okay? It needs partner that protect it against the predators. So it partners with a particular species of ant that is called Chromatogaster mimosa, that it's really a bodyguard and attack predators, herbivores that wants to eat the plants. And when the plant grows, for example, in the older age, there is another need. The need is to expand, to grow, to reproduce. So it partners with another species of ant that help it in this need. And this can be comparable to the growth of a company, for example, from the startup or when the company becomes a multinational, so it expands with affiliates around the world. So the question is, what kind of sequential partnership do you need at each stages of the growth of your company?
Yeah.
Okay, this would be an example for it.
Sylvia, can I expand that a little bit? I mean, I know Fred was asking about leaders, but I think even as humans, we go through a sequential life. Our life is sequential, right? You're born, you get married or not, and you get older, and then you die, or you retire, and then you die. What you're saying is that learning from nature, in every phase of our earthly journey as humans, we are interdependent. So as you go through life, remember that at some point you're going to get old, and when you get old, the younger ones are going to have to take care of you. The younger ones have to remember that as they get old, others will have to take care of them. So that's a very interesting construct. So I will move into another question here. There's a question from Lucia, and basically, I think it's about the feeling from Mother Nature. What can we learn from Mother Nature? I will combine her question or her comment with one that came from Lucy earlier, which was, does nature always do good? Or are there times when we should not emulate nature? So we do not prescribe biomimicry as a panacea for everything. There are some things in nature we do not want to emulate. What do you think about that?
Shall I go?
Yes, please go.
The interesting thing is nature has no morals. A predator or a prey is a predator or prey within a system. There's no good predator, bad predator. I mean, herbivores are predators of grass, for example. It's all a chain of life, and the circle of life in The Lion King is a bit wider than the one they're singing about in Disney. But the circle of life is good in itself because it perpetuates itself. And it does not waste any nutrients, any energy, any communication. It is efficient in self-preserving. So basically, nature as a whole has no morals, but only has self-preservation as a goal, and sending genes into the future in order to preserve the ecosystem at wide. So I think nature cannot do wrong since there's no morals. And as long as the system adapts and self-preserves and diversity and resilience is there, we should also learn from that and be able to be a bit more humble. You were saying before, Lawrence, that we're interdependent, but we're also interdependent with nature. I mean, if we did not have our gut bacteria, we would not live. If we would not have food, we would not live. So we're also intertwined with other species in order for us to live. Is eating meat bad? Today, maybe that's a consensus that's growing, that eating animals is not good, but eating plants is also a predation. So we need to get our nutrients from somewhere. And so that's just a circle of it. So nature cannot do wrong, since self-preservation is the ultimate goal.
Silvia, let me ask you a question. Now that Michaela injected these ideas around self-preservation, we're talking about climate change, which is a long-term thing for some, but it's actually happening right now. And as I read the book, one of the mentors was the cheetah. And the cheetah has a very interesting thing that I'd like you to talk about. It seems to have patience. It waits. It takes its time. We seem to be in a world today where, and Michaela and I discussed this a few days ago, where there seemed to be a lot of impatience. We want everything now. How do we learn from the cheetah why patience is important as opposed to impatience, especially when you're dealing with policy making? Things may take a long time, but people don't have the time to wait. So how do we communicate the importance of patience, and how do we learn patience or relearn patience, which we have when we're young children, but we lose it as we grow up?
Yeah, thank you, Lawrence, for this question. Cheetah is an incredible animal. Really, I got in love with this animal. It's also the symbol of biomimicry for business. So cheetah really is incredible. And as I wrote in my book, cheetahs are sprinters. They are not long distance runners. What does it mean? Cheetah chase the prey, stalk. Let me say it stalks the prey. He observes all the landscape, trying to find the prey in the horizon, okay? And once with its incredible sight, it sees the prey. It doesn't jump on the prey immediately, because it knows, okay, it knows that run or that chase costs a lot of energies. So it tries the best that it can, okay, to get the prey, to get the animal he's stalking, okay, because it needs to eat. So it stalks the prey. Let me say, it studies also all the movement, the context, everything. It's incredible. And once it's pretty sure that it can get the prey, it start to run at an incredible speed. Let me say that cheetahs are the Ferrari of the savannah, and so it runs with this incredible speed and jump on the prey, and one to third time it's successful, okay? And after that, it doesn't eat the prey immediately. This is incredible. It's really vulnerable after that chase, because it consumes a lot of energy. It needs to recover from that waste of energy, okay? So there's a time that cheetah is really vulnerable. So strategic speed goes in hand with vulnerability. Okay, so if we want to run, let me say, if we want to run, if we want to be strategic speeders, also we have to bear in mind that we need to be vulnerable.
So it's very, very interesting. So we talk about the patience of the cheetah, Michaela, from a communication standpoint, even though I know you didn't study it a lot, but I'm sure you've read Silvia's book and you can comment. Let's talk about the communication style of the elephant. Another interesting mentor in Silvia's book. What do you think we can learn from elephants in terms of their communication style as humans?
The most amazing thing about elephants, except they're just fantastic animals anyway, is their multimodal communication. They communicate with touch. When you see elephants, they always touch each other with the trunk, especially the babies. They communicate with, of course, their voices. Let's call them voices, but they also communicate through the ground. They use seismic communication. They will imprint like drumming on the ground, and with their very, very sensitive feet, other elephants can pick up these vibrations miles and miles away, meaning they have like almost a secret communication mode that nobody can hear except their own species. They also communicate with flapping their ears, with their whole body, with scent. They mark territory to a certain extent, especially males. Of course, for mating rituals. They have so many ways of communicating in order to keep their community together. They communicate for the two only reasons nature communicates and also humans communicate. There's two reasons. One is the social behavior. You belong to the pack or you don't belong to the pack. We reinforce you being part of the pack or the species or the group or the community by touch, by sound, keeping in contact and so on. And then there's the communication towards the outside, which is do something or stop doing something. There's only two purposes to communication. Get somebody or something to stop or do something or create community. There's only two ways. When you go to the office in the morning and you say hi to Vanessa, you're doing the social thing. Mm-hmm. But also when you're telling Vanessa, could you please, I don't know, switch on this webinar, you're asking her to do something, but also creating community. You cannot not communicate in that sense.
So Michaela, then let's bring it down, let's bring it home, the more practical as leaders who are listening, and other leaders who will listen to this conversation afterwards. How do we develop the multimodal communication skills? Because we seem to be right now overwhelmed by either audio communication, but not visual. We don't use other senses. How does a leader develop those other senses to be able to be a multimodal communicator?
I would say start by communicating with nature. Go into nature and listen and look closely. And you know, when I do my daily walk in the woods, when it's rained, you can hear the difference of the sound of rain on leaves or on pine trees. Once you get attentive and reconnect, and also with your community, if you can sense the pulse of a community. We humans are very good at nonverbal cues. Otherwise, we would not be able to function as a society. We can see how somebody dresses, how their skin is better or worse, or how the hair is. And we actually do this communication, but we don't really pay attention to it most of the time. We can see facial expressions, the way somebody moves. You can tell if someone is sick or not. But again, because of speed or the supposed efficiency of our society, which is not efficient in energy, but efficient in time, maybe, we're sprinting like the cheetah all the time, which means while we sprint, we cannot look at the prey. You know what I mean? We're not sensing everything that we could sense if we took the time or put the attention into it. So I think it's all about being attentive to clues that are around us anyway, all the time.
Silvia, let's bring it back to you. Attentiveness, sensing the cue, being more sensing more around us, tying that back to patience, because that's one of the combination. As I look at the book, I'm looking at how do we emulate some of the species, some of the cheetah's behavior, some of the elephant's behavior, because if we had the multimodal ability of the elephant and the patience of the cheetah, we could be better decision makers. Wouldn't you agree?
Yeah. So I answered this. This is a really interesting question and observation, Lawrence. Let me say that nature is really well connected with the self. Each animal is really well connected with the self, but also with the context, okay? And all the other organisms in this context. So it's connection. And I was thinking regarding humans, okay, Professor Sharma from MIT of Boston said that all the problems and the crises that there are in this world right now are the results of three divides. The divide between the ecological divide, that is the divide between self and nature. The social divide, that is the divide between self with others. And the third one, probably the most important one, is the spiritual divide, that is the divide between self with the deeper self. So we need really to go back to our blind spot, that is the inner source from which we act, we communicate, we think. And animals, nature is really well connected with that source. So they also use a lot the somatic intelligence, the intelligence of the body that our ancestor had, and still some population in the world, the natives, for example, in Africa, there are the Bushmen that are really, really using the somatic intelligence. So they sense, they are like probes, and they can feel everything. So probably we need to go back to that source. We need to reconnect with our inner self, with our body, with our intuition. Probably this is the secret.
So there is a question from Vanessa, and it's great because she has brought us back to this issue of interconnectedness and mutualism. So Vanessa writes, do you think the pandemic has changed how nations view these mutualistic relationships? Are government leaders gaining a better understanding of our interconnectedness, or do we need to nudge them in this area, for example, how they address climate change? Do you think world leaders understand, or corporate leaders, or even families within homes, within families, right? Do we really understand these mutualistic relationships and the interdependence and interconnectedness? Maybe Michaela first, and then we'll go to Silvia.
I think deep down we know that's the right way, but we're hoarding bananas again. That's in nature. There's only in the beginning, when you have grass succession in a savanna, you have competition because you have scarce land, you have scarce resources. So a species will come, try to make the most of it, get extinct because it gets taken over by another one. So you have fierce competition up to a moment when this one will-be ecosystem becomes to an equilibrium and wants to self-perpetuate. And when you want to self-perpetuate, what do? You collaborate. I wonder if we're still at the pinnacle of competition, and when will we switch to collaboration because there's no other way out? I think for climate change, for most wicked problems, for the pandemic, right now we can still see countries hoarding 4 doses, 5 doses. I don't know how many doses they're gonna keep and send none to the countries that need it. Even though we know that leaving countries without vaccines will make the pandemic come back and bite us in the back. We kind of know that it's wrong, but we still do it. I think it's human nature. It's also this whole paradigm of zero-sum games that is very human and very pregnant right now around us. But I think there is no other way than collaboration if we want to get out of it more or less in a good state. And again, I was telling you that before, and we agree with Silvia, we're not saving the planet, we're saving the human race, right? And also, well, as long as we say we save the planet is something that is remote and is divided from us. When we say we're saving ourselves, we're part of the system. And since we're part of the system, we can change it.
Yeah, Silvia, let's go to you, but I want this to be a dialogue. So, I mean, I don't want just to be asking you guys questions. So feel free to ask me any question. We have about 15 more minutes left. So if there's a question you want to ask me, feel free. So it's a conversation. Silvia, let's build a little bit on what Michaela said in terms of Vanessa's question around mutualism. Do you think we are at the point where greed and all these different things, greed, selfishness, all of these things, do you find those things in nature? I mean, in the Savanna, as I saw the film, those animals of different species, they coexist perfectly okay, right? So there's coexistence in the Savanna. Yes, an elephant or someone has to eat, he eats, and then he's content. So talk about lack of contentment in the human species, and what can we learn from nature about being content, and how much that lack of contentment is part of the problem that we're facing as a human species.
Yeah, in nature, I think even though we think that there are some bad aspects in nature, they are not so bad. I know that I'm saying something that probably shock people, but also the pandemic, the COVID, the SARS-CoV-2 virus, it's a way of nature to control the population, to create balance. So everything in nature, it's in a cycle, it's balance. So predators are absolutely necessary in the food chain to maintain balance, because the prey cannot spread too much. Okay, so there isn't a bad aspect, because also if we perceive it as a bad aspect, it's just balance in nature. It's incredible. Thinking about again the whistling thorn acacia, really you know, there is a balance between the herbivores, the elephant, for example, the ant, and the plant. So when, if you remove the elephant or herbivores from this relationship, you really are damaging all the ecosystems, okay? Because if you remove the elephants or the giraffe, that they are eating the whistling thorn acacia, the whistling thorn acacia doesn't need a specific ant to protect them anymore. And this ant, because they need the nectar and food from the plant, and the plant, produce less nectar, and because they need food, they start, you know, to farm bugs that are you know, bad for the plants. So at the very end, there is a minus for all the organism. Okay, so everything is connected, and the COVID really, it was a chance for us to understand that the behavior of everybody has an impact on the whole system. Okay, and also that zoology and medicine are branches of the same plant. We cannot think about medicine without thinking about zoology, and vice versa. Everything is connected. Interconnection, I think, is one of the biggest law in nature, together with diversity.
Yes, and that is so true in the sense that if you lose the understanding of interconnectedness, your corporation could fall short and you could be in trouble. I'd like to bring one question raised by Lucy, and if you guys can give me very short answers, because I still want to get through a few more things here, and please feel free if you have a question for me as well. Just a quick question, and maybe well, let's go to Michaela and then Silvia if you have a very short answer. Basically, Lucy wants you to give an example of how you were able to introduce biomimicry to a company. Can you just give one or two examples, each of you, about how you did it and how you applied it to that company, so that those listening can think about bringing biomimicry to the energy sector and apply it to the energy companies around the world? Maybe Michaela, one example, and then Silvia, one example as well.
I'm just delivering a report to a client about how they can have a use of social media that is targeted at different audiences for different channels, which is also, maybe we can put it back to the elephant that has multimodal communication for different audiences within the community or outside the community. And that's one way that you can apply biomimicry for communication.
Silvia?
Yeah, because I'm an executive and team coach as well. You know, I'm using biomimicry for improving leadership and team working. So a part of the leadership safari, I created also another product that the name is We Biomimic, that it's kind of coaching tools for business teams, where there are 29 different mentors from nature, ranging from plants, animals, the human bodies. Don't forget that, guys, we are nature. Our brain is nature. Our whole body is nature. So also our our body can teach us a lot. So, and also microorganisms like viruses, like bacteria. So these 29 mentors becomes models that teams can look at, and by understanding their strategy for surviving, there are powerful questions, okay, that can help teams to think out of the box and to find innovative solutions to problems that they have, to become high-performing teams. So I'm using biomimicry in my coaching practice. So and yes, also in the book, there are many other examples of how with powerful questions.
I see in the chat here, Michaela, Lawrence, I have a question for you. So go ahead, Michaela, what's your question?
Yeah, I wanted to come back to the interconnectedness we were talking about before. The power grid is as integrated as you can. I mean, the flow never ends. Now that you know about biomimicry, because we're putting you on the spot now. Now you know about biomimicry. What do you think the energy sector can learn about from biomimicry to apply it to better use the resources that are finite?
There are three things. The first thing you've already talked about, which is diversification, the importance of diversity. I think understanding the fact that we need many different resources to address the problems we're facing, that there's no one size fits all. So I think the energy sector is recognizing the importance of taking a multi-approach at looking at different clean energy resources to address this issue of climate change. So you have everything from, you have nuclear, you have renewables, you have biomass, you have different sources being brought. So I think understanding diversity is important. I think the other thing we can learn from biomimicry is how you communicate. I think one of the challenges we have as a sector is, like I said at the beginning, we do a very good job in keeping the lights on. but we don't always do a good job in telling the story. So we have to also learn one thing which is extremely important, is that infrastructure takes time to build. So we need to communicate the importance of patience, the importance of knowing when to strike, and sometimes also using patience from the standpoint of the policymakers, so that when you put in a policy, it will take time for that policy to bear fruit. And sometimes we as a sector, we are forced to move so fast because there are other pressures pushing us. So diversification, internal communication, external communication, using all the different senses, but then most importantly, learning from the cheetah to be patient and talking about the importance of patience going forward as an industry. We have about, it's saying here a minute, but let's say 3 more minutes. And I want to close with asking you both a very interesting question. Next week, the world leaders are going to Glasgow. President Biden, Prime Minister Boris Johnson, the Prime Minister and presidents from all over the world will be coming. The two of you have been called to meet these prime ministers and leaders. You're in a room with them, and you have each 1 or 2 minutes to give them an advice on what they should do from a biomimicry standpoint, using the skills you've talked about to solve the climate crisis. What will you tell Joe Biden, Boris Johnson, and the world leaders? Let's start with Silvia and then Michaela. What is your advice to the world leaders when they go to Glasgow? How can they use biomimicry to solve the problems we're facing? You go first, Silvia.
Because I'm a coach, Lawrence, I will start with a question. I try to trigger, a process, a mental process in people in order they can give them the right answer. So I would ask them, how does nature run? If you look at the nature, how does it work? How does it run? What kind of energy it's using, nature? Because the fossil fuels are, I think, the main problem in the climate change. We know that nature runs on sunlight, and it's perfectly working. It's perfectly running without damaging anything, okay, without polluting. So this would be probably the question I've asked them.
I like the fact that you will start by asking a question, because I'm a big believer in questions. I love to ask questions, as you probably know now. Michaela, you then get the last word. Silvia has given these world leaders the advice that they should think about what would nature do in terms of how nature works and how nature solves problems. What will you tell Joe Biden, Boris Johnson, and the rest of the world leaders who will be in Glasgow next week?
I would advise them to act like a cell. First, probe your environment. Get to know the context. Get to know the context, listen to the context, feel what is going on, and don't always, go with your preconceived ideas. See what's going on really, listen to people, listen to users, listen to consumers. Don't only listen to lobbies, listen deeply, and deep inside, they will know what to do.
Interesting. So since I will be a fly in the wall in that room when you guys are there with those world leaders, I will be sitting on the side. I won't say nothing. I will just pass a slip to you and Silvia and ask you to tell them one thing. And that has been the theme of this conversation. And that is, we live in an interconnected world and we depend on each other. And climate change, if it's not solved, if it affects people in Africa, it's going to affect people in America. If it affects people in Sweden, it's going to affect people in China. If it affects people in China, it will affect people in Australia. We live in an interconnected world, and therefore we have to apply mutualism. Now that you have taught me these words, I can use them. We have to apply mutualism in how we address the world's problems. This has been one of our longer conversations because we had two distinguished guests, Michaela and Silvia. Thank you so much. It's been a wonderful, stimulating conversation. We didn't get through all my questions, which I had thought to ask you, but we covered a lot. and I am sure that the audience have gotten a lot out of this conversation. Before we end, Michaela, last word. What gives you hope for biomimicry to be the solution to some of the world's problems? And then Silvia, what gives you hope?
I think we're at a time when change will happen. 10 years ago was too early. I think the momentum is here. The opportunities are here. Let's just do it.
Thank you. Silvia?
I think that we must change. Otherwise, we won't survive.
That's
so biomimicry probably is one of the solutions.
Well,
so let's biomimic.
Let's biomimic. Well, listen, thank you so much. This has been a fascinating conversation. And let me now turn it over to Vanessa, who will give us the final wrap up. And I really enjoyed talking to both of you and hope to see you very soon when we start to travel again. Vanessa, over to you.
Thank you.
Thank you,
Thanks so
Lauren.
much, Lawrence.
Thank you again to Michaela and Silvia for joining us today and sharing their insights on biomimicry. Thank you to everyone for joining and asking so many thoughtful questions throughout the session. We will be sending out a recording to all attendees, which we will also be sharing on our YouTube channel, where you can find recordings from other past virtual conversations and webinars. We encourage you to register for other sessions in this webinar series by visiting tinyurl.com/EEI-COP26. Our Destination 2050 dialogues will continue the week after COP26 with sessions on finance and economics and how to go from policy to action. To continue engaging with EEI international programs, please follow us on Twitter or visit our website. Thank you and have a wonderful rest of your day.